Tēnā koutou katoa, warm welcome to everyone. A particularly warm welcome to members of the community and our public that are here, acknowledging our District Council staff, our elected members, and also our Mayor Gary Kuchar that is joining us online as well. And then also warm welcome to our media that are here. Just before we start and continue with the rest of our agenda, I would like to acknowledge the passing of Arrow Kola. She was a member of our youth council here for Waitaki District Council, and her farewell was yesterday. And I just wanted to extend a very, deep condolences and heartfelt thoughts to her family during this very difficult time, as we can all imagine. And also just want to acknowledge Councillor Ryan, Councillor Linwood, Leanne Kingan for supporting our youth councillors during this time, and others in our district council that have provided their pastoral care support that is really important. And also thank you to those that had attended her celebration of life yesterday. So if I can please invite our elected members, our staff, and you're very welcome to join us as well, just to respect the passing of her, and also just to acknowledge the service and support that she has provided for our youth council over this current term. If we can just be all upstanding and acknowledge in a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. Okay, apologies to those that are standing that we don't have enough seats, but we can feel your presence here well and truly. Okay, so just in terms of apologies, do we have any apologies? Only Mayor Kuchar just in person, but he is here present online. Okay, any declarations of interest? No? Okay, just before we head into opening of the public forum, we have a number of speakers that we have here today. I just wanted to, just to be clear in terms of what our expectation and the outcome that we want to try and achieve today. I know that this is we have some pretty divisive, challenging topics that are here on our agenda, and I just hope that we will have a respectful, robustful debate. We do have some important kind of priority areas that we do need to give time to, while there are some procedural matters that are that may not necessarily need more of the time. But just in terms of timekeeping, I'll just remind our elected members that we will try and stick to our timeframes. Our morning tea breaks, we'll have a few minutes signal just to get ourselves ready just before we start up again, and that we also just respectful in all of our conversations, our discussions, and also our debates that we will have today as well. Okay, if I can with the public forum, please, and I would like to invite our first two speakers. We have Kaylin Huntress and then followed by Cheryl Black. So, is that in place of Cheryl Black?
I said we would have a representative from Dorothy.
Okay. Okay, so we have two that are so welcome. Yeah, if you can take a seat there, and then also Carissa, if you wanted to have a seat as well, and then you can speak after. It'll just because the topic is the same, and then you can have your time one after the other. Thank you.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the council today. I do not consent to this medical treatment. This water contains hydrofluorosilicic acid. It is not calcium fluoride, the naturally occurring fluoride found in nature that makes up more than 12% of the Earth's crust. This is a different chemical. It is a byproduct of the production of chemical fertilizer. This toxic waste is expensive to dispose of. Chem Waste in Christchurch charges $1,000 a barrel to dispose of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Industries have a pollution solution. They don't have to pay to dispose of it because they sell it to you. According to water.org.nz, the governing body of water professionals in New Zealand, hydrofluorosilicic acid has MAVs, maximum acceptable values, of lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and uranium. That's what's in this. I choose not to take medications like this because I am sensitive. I have fluorosis, fluoride poisoning due to a fluoride overdose when I was a child. That's why my teeth are discolored. I also have a neurological condition that is aggravated by the ingestion of fluoride and the other toxic metals found in this glass. This causes me medical harm. I do not consent to this medical treatment. This is the only medication delivered this way. It's not a pharmaceutical regulated by the Medicines Act, subject to the same safety standards. But we're only told it's one of the best public interventions in health in the world. Which is odd because it's not very popular. Out of 193 countries in the world, only 25 fluoridate their water supply. Out of the world's 193 countries, only 8 fluoridate more than half of their population. For being one of the world's best public health interventions, a lot of countries don't do it. New Zealand is in the minority in this case. Now, when my doctor recommends that I take a medical intervention, I ask questions about the possible side effects and how it could affect my health, for good and for bad. In all other situations, with any other medication, I can give my informed consent or I can withhold it. My body, my choice. No individual doctor can force me to take a medication against my will. But Dr. Sarfati, the Director General of Health in New Zealand, claims that she can. So I want to ask her 5 questions as the doctor who is administering this medication. And I'd like you all to join me in asking her to have a public fluoride patient consultation, since we are all her patients. Please take one and pass it down. Thank you. We will read these 5 questions together.
Thank you, Karen. Excuse me, we've got a couple more minutes left for your
Yes,
time.
I'll be
before I
under
need
5
to hand
minutes.
it up. Thank you.
When the time comes, at the appropriate time for the council, I'd like you to vote as a council to formally support my request. I'm asking for 30 minutes on Zoom with Dr. Sarfati, spending 5 minutes on each of these questions.
You literally have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Great. I'm also sending you digitally these 5 questions. Number 1, what is the risk-benefit analysis comparing dental benefits with potential harms from bone cancer, thyroid disorders, and lowered IQ? Number 2, is there any surveillance in place to monitor cases of fluoride overdose? If not, why not? How many New Zealanders do you expect to suffer adverse health effects? Number 3, why do you advocate for internal ingestion of fluoride instead of topical application? Number 4, why are the rates of dental decay so similar in non-fluoridated areas? Number 5, is a decrease of 7 IQ points functionally significant or not? And then I get into details about the 2014 Royal Society report that the government relies on as their evidence for fluoridating the water supply. I list all the citations and links at the end of this document, and I ask you as my local council to formally support my request for this public fluoride patient consultation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Samuel.
Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carissa Samuelu. I'm a local mother of 2 young children and a breastfeeding peer support person here in Waitaki. I speak for myself and on behalf of parents, grandparents and members of our community. We are gravely concerned for those that do not have a voice at this table, the children and the future generations of Waitaki. There is now significant and growing evidence that fluoridated water presents unacceptable risk to our children. So I'm going to refer to a few of the published studies and I'll give you all a copy of my notes afterwards with the references included. Just last week, a new US government-funded study was published showing women exposed to fluoride during pregnancy had significant changes in the proteins in their cord blood during their second trimester. 2 other studies had already confirmed that when pregnant women are exposed to fluoride, the fluoride crosses the placental barrier to the fetus. Prenatal exposure has been associated with lower IQ in children, increased symptoms of ADHD, and poorer cognitive function. Canadian and US studies of mother-child pairs where the mothers drank fluoridated water during pregnancy have found links to their babies having poorer inhibitory control and cognitive flexibility and also increased neurobehavioral problems. These studies had a fluoridation rate lower than Waitaki's rate for fluoridation. There are a number of studies showing that prenatal exposure at the level that Waitaki Council will be dosing fluoride into the water has a likely detrimental and irreversible effect on the neurological development of our children. Then we look at younger babies. The Ministry of Health's own guidelines for the use of fluoride states the group at greatest risk of exceeding the upper limit are the very young, particularly the fully formula-fed infant, where fluoridated water has been used to prepare the formula. The report established that a fully formula-fed infant exceeds the upper limit approximately 1/3 of the time for formula prepared with water at 0.7 milligrams and more than 90% of the time with water at 1. So the Ministry of Health is acknowledging that formula-fed babies are already exceeding the current upper limit rates a lot of the time. How many of our young families are aware of this? Through my breastfeeding peer support certification training, I have learned that in the Southland DHB region, 17% of babies are partially or exclusively formula fed by the time they are discharged from hospital. This percentage continues to rise. A large demographic living here are the Pacific Island peoples. Health in New Zealand stats show that they have the highest percentage of exclusively formula fed babies, and again, this percentage is rising. A US study released this year found that exclusively formula-fed babies in fluoridated areas receive an average of 200 times more fluoride than breastfed babies. This clearly places Waitaki's large and growing demographic of Pacific Island babies at the greatest risk for neurological harm. A Canadian study found that exposure to increasing levels of fluoride in tap water was associated with non-verbal intellectual abilities, with the effect being more pronounced in formula-fed children. There are now a multitude of studies showing that early life exposure to fluoride irreversibly harms children's brain development. By adding fluoride to Oamaru's water supply, you are placing them at risk, right from when they're in their mother's womb. The evidence of how much difference water fluoridation makes for children's teeth is now very much in doubt. But even if you believe fluoridation makes a meaningful difference to children's teeth, we can't prioritize their teeth over their brains. That is why I'm speaking to you today, for our children today and in the future here in Waitaki. They do not have a voice. We are their voice here. We are asking you to be brave and to uphold the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act because it is the right thing to do. Instead of implementing this directive, implement a successful initiative such as Scotland's Child Smile program. As they state, Child Smile is reducing inequalities in oral health and ensuring access to dental services for every child across the country. There, the children brush their teeth together every day after lunch and create these daily habits. It's simple, cheap, and it works far better than anything New Zealand has done. Mr. Mayor and councillors, we are asking you to stand up and be the voice for our children and the future generations of Waitaki. We are asking you again to stop fluoridation now. Now going to pass out, we have a list of requests that we would like you to vote on. So I'm just going to pass this around. If you could take one each.
Thank you for speaking. That brings us to the end, Kopa, but we'll acknowledge the information that you're circulating. Insofar as our role with council in terms of community water fluoridation, it provides that councils, they must comply with the Director General's directions. But we do acknowledge and hear your submissions that you have shared with us today.
Thank you. Could I respond to that? Deputy Mayor?
I'll just open it up to any other questions or comments that the governance team may have.
So we have instruct Waitaki District Council staff to refrain from or cease adding fluoride until the Ordered Bill of Rights Act. Analysis has been provided and considered at a further full council meeting. Write to the Director General of Health seeking assurance that Waitaki District Council will not be prosecuted for non-compliance with the directive unless or until the BORA analysis has been done. If contrary to this request, you continue to permit water fluoridation, request a report from Waitaki District Council staff proposing mechanisms, possible locations and estimated costs for public non-fluoridated water sources. Ask Waitaki District Council staff to increase the frequency of water testing to a monthly basis for lead at various points around the distribution area for the first several months after fluoride is added to the water supply. Issue a public notice warning that bottle-fed infants are likely to regularly exceed the upper limit of fluoride currently recommended in New Zealand, as acknowledged in the 2014 OPMCSA report, and also suggesting that pregnant women and people with thyroid or kidney diseases consider seeking medical advice to consider what impacts water fluoridation may have for them. Hold a public meeting or information session with Ministry of Health experts so that local people can ask them questions in regard to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hopkins, I'll just take a quick question before we need to move on to the other members of the public forum.
Yeah, thank you for this, and thank you, Caitlin, for the 5 questions, which I think it would be lovely, I think, for the whole country to have the Director General of Health answer those 5 perfectly reasonable questions, in my view. And I think that they have an obligation to actually give clear and considered evidence in response to the issues that you raise in those questions. One for you, however, I notice here, first of all, the first thing you want us to do is instruct our staff to refrain from or cease adding fluoride. Then you say that you want us to write to the Director General of Health seeking an assurance that WDC will not be prosecuted. Now, I don't think we can commit officers to do or not do something in the absence of an assurance that prosecution and cost would not apply. So would you accept the fact that possibly if we're going to do anything, and I'm not speaking for anyone at this stage because we obviously have to consider this and give it due consideration, but would you accept that it might be better for us to write to the Director General of Health first, seeking an assurance there be no prosecution before we took any action by way of directing staff?
I would, yes, that's very good suggestion, councillor Hopkins. I would suggest that that be done urgently as soon as possible, and it should have already been done in my view.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we close off this bit? Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Samweli, for coming in, and also Mr. Huntress for sharing your views and speaking at our public forum. We will be discussing the petition later on in the meeting.
Sorry, in this meeting.
We have it as a late agenda item that we will just discuss, but we will be going through that later on.
Also just confirming that it was going to be discussed at the following meeting on the 20th of August.
It will be formally discussed, but we will acknowledge receipt of the petition at this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please invite our next two speakers? We have Simon Williamson and then also Kate McGregor. Warm welcome to our public forum. Thank you for coming in.
Morning, Council. Madam Chair and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to come along today and speak to you. This whole issue seems to be going round and round in circles a little bit. Of the 2,000 odd property owners with overlay mapping, a lot seem to have had their areas increased without any communication from the council. We're getting more and more people that are telling us that that when they look at the maps that the area has actually increased, and they've heard nothing back from the staff. They're also saying that the on-site, they haven't been on site to ground truth a lot of these areas. The staff are saying that they have, which is not true. We've also been proven that this is wrong, and we can do so. Told that the landscape architects and the biodiversity officers would be peer reviewed 2 or 3 years ago. To this stage, nothing has happened that we have seen anyway. And especially with one of the landscape architects, there's a rather disturbing history in the basin that you are well aware of, I'm sure. There's also very experienced people out there, far more experienced than the people that you're using that have got 40 odd years of experience in the district, and Peter Espy and David Norton, that you don't seem to be using any of their intellect. Some of the overlays on freehold land, you've got hundreds of thousands of hectares of ground already shut up through tenure review. The whole reason people went through the process of tenure review and everyone had a say in it was to identify areas that they perceived to be specific and special. Now, to put overlay mapping, SNAs and ONLs over the freehold land that's left, and those people had a right to farm that land or they wouldn't have done tenure review. So it's something you need to seriously look at and take freehold land out of those overlay maps. There have been numerous recorded examples of landowners requesting consultation and being refused by the council staff. The government have given a clear mandate that the SNAs, ONLs, ONFs, SNFs, RSLs and SASMs, the mapping should stop. until the RMA review is completed. Otherwise, it's just going to cost the council a whole lot of money because they have already stated that there will be major changes to the RMA. So why go down this track and have to redo it all again? It just seems senseless. We've also had letters from the banking fraternity explaining that the proposals that you're coming up with will devalue the land by up to 30% or more. So as a council and as a rate take, I think it's a pretty serious issue that you need to be having a look at. And leading into that, on the RMA Section 32 analysts, has there been any economic impact to the landowners, the community, and the district council? Certainly, we haven't seen any proof of it. We've asked for it time and time again. And it must be a statutory requirement. We're asking that you park the draft plan and concentrate on what the council has got to do in front of it. Don't be afraid of the NGOs, the Forests and Birds, the DOC. They may go to court, but I know who I'd rather be in court with, and you need to stand beside your ratepayers. Finally, we got a letter from the CEO on the 5th of July telling people they can object to the plan once it's notified. We've spent a lot of time and effort on this trying to get a result before it goes to that stage. And it's been frustrating to get to that, we don't want to go to that notified stage. That's why we're putting the work in beforehand. In February, we had a compromise that any modified productive land be omitted from the overlays, but it seems that the staff have reneged on this agreement. I don't know why, but it seemed a pretty practical assumption to me. The money that the rural community and the town community, for that matter, have spent on consenting and compliance is and can be astronomical. So what will happen if you revoke a lot of this land? The end result, not only to the communities, but to the district council in a rating sense, will be major. So all we can ask is that for once and for all, park this stuff up until you get further advice from the government about the review of the RMA, because you're going to have to redo it again then anyway. Thank you. I've also got some papers here to just hand around a few.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williamson. We will take Kate McGregor, and then we might have 2 minutes just to ask any questions before we carry on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Kate McGregor. I'm a mum, I'm a farmer, and I'm an environmental consultant. I speak to you today as an affected landowner and on behalf of the 44 land holdings I represent and those landowners who do not have the same opportunity to speak today. I'd like to raise concerns I have in regard to the process and the impacts of the draft district plan that we'll have on the Waitaki district. Firstly, the consultation process. At the District Plan Review Subcommittee meeting on the 20th of June, a comment was made from a council staff member, and I quote, "We kind of have exhausted our options in terms of engagement." I could speak on behalf of 68 landholders that attended a meeting in Napara in May that would disagree strongly with this comment. If we as a group of landowners can organise a meeting on the draft plan with short notice and have 68 landowners attend, how can the District Council not find suitable methods of engagement? A summary table was provided in the agenda at the 20th of June meeting with notes of what consultation had been carried out. The number of errors in this table makes this information inaccurate, yet it's provided as evidence supporting recommendations that are being made by council staff to the subcommittee. As an example, it was stated that a site visit for our property was not able to be carried out because the landscape architect ran out of time. Instead, our site visit and the significant natural features in question were viewed from 2 neighbouring properties. I'd like to point out firstly that not all of the significant natural feature that is mapped is visible from the 2 neighbouring properties. Secondly, I attended one site visit at a neighbouring property with a council staff member. However, the landscape architect was not present. Secondly, there have been no minutes that have been made publicly available from the District Plan Review Subcommittee meetings. This makes it extremely difficult for ratepayers to stay engaged and up to date with the District Plan Review process. It also raises concerns regarding the transparency that the public is entitled to from the council. Thirdly, multiple requests have been made to council staff for facts and evidence to support the mapping features, landscapes and sites and areas of cultural significance. The Mayor has also made this request at a subcommittee meeting. Ōkaha have responded to these requests by saying they will only engage at the notification stage. How is it that ratepayers lose their rights to have a say on their private property regarding the SASM overlay, and why do council accept this lack of consultation, advice and engagement? If Ōkaha is paid by the Waitaki District Council to provide this mapping, then as a consultant to the council, surely there must be an expectation that they are responsive to these requests. Finally, the lack of ground truthing of the proposed overlays. Landscape architecture is defined on the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects website as, and I quote, a design profession that combines art and science. Is an art of drawing a line on a map truly acceptable when it comes with a multi-million-dollar financial implication that this district plan could have on our district? Landowners have been provided with an A4 printed PDF map showing the overlay boundaries. If you can imagine this on a scale for a farm as an example. One submitter has pushed for more detailed mapping, only to be told by council that a house that was included in an ONF boundary overlay was an unintentional error. We all make errors, but this reinforces the need for ground truthing when there is so much at stake. I've hardly touched on the financial implications of the draft plan and more specifically the mapping overlays that it will have on our district. A rural bank, in response to the draft plan review and the mapping overlays of a landowner's farming entities, has provided information stating that changes in regulations have impacted land values by as much as 30% in other areas, as well as eroded landowners' equity by as much as 50%. Additional compliance costs, lower land values and increased interest rates due to lower equity will all impact rural incomes with flow-on effects for the Oamaru Township and local employment, which at the moment when we're facing 100 job losses from Oamaru from lean meats is a real concern. My final point is regarding the letter myself and a number of us have received recently from the Chief Executive. This came about after a motion was passed, and I've shortened this, that the Plan Review Subcommittee propose an appropriate response to property owners who raised issues with inadequate consultation. The generic letter, which I have a copy of here today, states that the District Plan Review Subcommittee recommends that your concerns are raised through the submissions process once a proposed district plan is notified under the RMA. Is this what was intended as an appropriate response by the subcommittee? My request today is the same as Simon's, is that the process of the district plan review is halted as the directive from government has suggested while the RMA reform is being carried out. And to reinforce that we've lost sight of the goal of protecting truly significant areas, this needs to be done in a partnership with local council and with the landowners. All we're asking is for a meaningful and productive engagement process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kate, for talking to us this morning. Do I have any comments or questions from elected members? Yes, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Chair of the District Plan Review, Mr. Williamson, I'll have to point out your assertion that staff reneged on the February 24 decision of the subcommittee to remove the overlay off productive farmland. It was not in fact staff, it was the District Plan Subcommittee who had to backtrack on the basis of planning advice that we had received that position was not sustainable. And the subcommittee has been working to find other ways to ensure
that our landowners are treated equitably in the planning process. But unfortunately, we were defeated by the process in this instance, not the desire that we were trying to achieve.
Yes, councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you both. Something increasingly seems to me to be possibly the case, and that is that people seem to regard notification as finality, as an imposition. Now, Kate, you're a planner. You would be aware, would you not, that the notification process is stipulated, set out in the RMA, that it's lengthy, that it involves submission, cross-submission, all those sorts of things. And there are a whole variety of checks and balances, including an assessment of the Section 32 material, that must be undertaken before any decision is made and any plan is notified. And this is the statutory process that the Act stipulates is to be done. So at some stage, we're going to have to do that, are we not?
Firstly, I'll clarify, I'm not a planner. I'm dangerously studying a little bit of planning, so I'm dangerous in that I know a little bit, but not enough. Well, firstly, I think to carry out a Section 32 report prior to doing a whole lot of this work seems a little bit backward. In that, are we not looking at the cost of potentially what is proposed going to do to our district?
Okay. We can't notify without the Section 32 analysis to support the objectives, policies and rules that are under debate and under consideration for submission and cross-submission. If we did that, you or anyone else would challenge us and the whole thing would be thrown out of court.
And we've made multiple requests to see a copy of the Section 32 report, which I mean, where does that even sit? We've been told it hasn't been completed and we're told it has been completed. So to be able to provide feedback on that now is impossible. I think the other thing, Jim, is to understand that once it gets to the notified stage, and you know this as well as anyone that's ever been involved, once it becomes notified, it becomes an extremely costly and time-consuming process, not just for landowners, but also for the council. And so I would suggest that working with landowners before it becomes a notified stage is likely to be a dollar saving for both council and landowners and a more workable solution.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hopkins, and it's also quite pertinent that it's quite hard to make changes, and history will tell us that, to a plan after it's been notified. And I know there's the opportunity there to do that, but surely the common sense thing to do is to make those changes and get it right before it's notified.
I'm sorry, look, I beg to differ. I've actually gone through the process of having a plan notified in Banks Peninsula, which was extraordinarily controversial and contentious at the time. And there were quite substantial changes made as a part of the submission and notification process. And there will be with this document. And the other thing that, and I'm not defending anyone in this matter, but it is quite clear that there are opposing views as to what is important in the natural environment. And there are agencies that actually have been empowered by previous government decisions. There are signals from the current government that they wish to actually revisit a number of those, but they have yet to actually produce a clear, precise catalogue list of the changes they are mooting. So all we can do at the moment is try to guess where they're heading. And I know where they're heading and I know what we can do to change, but the suggestion that nothing will happen through the notification process is historically false.
Thank you. I think that brings this part to a close, but I just want to acknowledge you both coming in and also the rural community that are here. We can hear that all you're asking for is genuine engagement in the process and consultation, which is acknowledged, and take that into consideration. There's another report, the 6.1, that we need to discuss after, but just also be reassured that the district planning subcommittee will also be meeting in a couple of weeks. As well. So just wanted to acknowledge your input, your contribution today to our meeting, and I'd like to draw our public forum process to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, if we can move to the late agenda item, L. in response to receiving in principle the petition. So that'll be one of the second attachments that we have.
I'm happy to move, Madam Chair, that we receive the petition.
Okay, so we have, so this is in response to the petition that the fluoride group had shared. So we have three recommendations here. Are you happy to move those recommendations, councillor Hopkins?
Sorry, let me just find that. Just give me a moment while I go to the,
All right, so I will read them.
okay.
So number one, agree that council agree to receive in principle the petition from Ms. Cheryl Black on behalf of petition signatories with the subject title petition stop water fluoridation pursuant to clauses 17.1, 17.2 Waitaki District Council standing orders as a late agenda item. So basically, we just need to accept it in principle that it is a late agenda item. Number two, as a consequence of the petition being a late agenda item, we agree only to receive it in principle and then allow Ms. Black to speak at the petition for 5 minutes during the public forum, which you had a representative undertake today, but defer consideration of the petition by council to the next council meeting on the 27th of August.
Yes, I'm happy to move those three.
Okay, do I have a second? Seconded by councillor Thompson. I'll put it to vote. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? All right, carried. Thank you. We move to, okay. Okay, let me get organised on the sofa. All right, we'll move to agenda item number 4. Public minutes of the previous meetings, they will all be deferred to an additional council meeting in August. We'll go straight to number 5, recommendations from, yes, councillor Hopkins.
Madam Chair, we've had discussion this morning about the minutes, in this instance for a subcommittee. But this delay in receipt of minutes is problematic. It is not good for our image or reputation. The comments made by one of the submitters here this morning is entirely valid. How can people assess decisions and processes if they can't look at those minutes? And I think it's fair and reasonable for us to ask the Chief Executive how and when he intends to actually resolve this matter, so that A, the backlog is cleared, and B, we don't have the same problem arising in future. I don't mean that as confrontation, but I do think we're entitled to get some clarity on the matter.
So I think the first thing to point out is that we have had a larger number of meetings than normal, and particularly around the district plan, which has created workload at the same time as we're going through a change, which is in the organisation through our transformation programme, which is impacting our staff. So it is in hand, this, but it's not something that we're going to sort out today or even in the next week. We're going through a process at the moment in terms of recruitment. Where all new and vacant roles in the new structure are being advertised, and it will take us some weeks to get through that. And then assuming we recruit to roles, it will take us some time to catch up with the backlog. But we do have it in hand, but it's not going to be resolved anytime soon. So I know this comes up every meeting, and I give pretty much the same answer every meeting over the past few weeks. But that is the answer.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to recommendations from committee reports. Item number 5.1 from our PAR committee. Okay, so there are recommendations there on page 12 that are put through for council to consider approving.
Madam Chair, I was hoping somebody else would move this, but I think it's procedural. It's been debated. I move the recommendation, starting with the words that council adopts a treasury strategy, etc., going through the 4 bullet points.
Thank you. Seconded by councillor Cowles. Any questions or queries in regards to the recommendations put forward? Okay, we'll put it to a vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Okay, carried. All right, we move to item agenda. I just want to advise just those that are joining us, we've just got a couple of procedural reports that we would like to put through. Then we're going to have morning tea break about 10:30, and then we'll head back into I think is what they call the main course. So okay, we'll move to 6.2, council submission on the speed limits. Page 90, I understand. Okay, 6.2, ratification of council submission on draft setting of speed limits. Okay, councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report was circulated and convened for us to comment on in its drafting. It has been sent, and I'm therefore happy to move that we ratify that submission.
Okay, seconded by councillor Holding. Thirded by councillor McCone. Any questions in regards to this? Yes, councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I do have one. I don't think, it is my understanding that this was a written submission only, that we didn't present to the select committee or was this presented to the select committee? And is it possible even now for officers to at some point give us, I notice on page 94, the submission point number 3, there are significant additional compliance and unbudgeted expenditure for RCAs associated with the proposed rule changes. Now, I thought all of the changes that had been mooted and were cancelled were actually funded by the Crown. So I'm just curious to know if officers at some point can actually let us know what some of these additional compliance and unbudgeted expenditures are or will be.
So, I mean, just to respond to that initially, I understand from our discussions with NZTA that essentially any speed limit that's been introduced since 2020, we will need to reverse. We won't get funding for all of that, and we've got a limited time frame to do it. And yeah, unless it meets very strict criteria, essentially every speed limit that was introduced on our roads will need to fund much of the cost of that. NZTA is looking at what it can help us fund, but also it's got its own challenge with all the changes in the state highway network.
Okay, any other questions? We already have a mover and a seconder of this recommendation that council formally ratifies the submission on the draft setting of speed limits 24 as submitted to the Ministry of Transport on the 11th of July. Seconded by councillor Holding. All right, we're ready to put that to a vote. Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Against? All right, carried. Thank you very much. We move to 6.3, I think on page 100. Council submission on local government water services.
Might want to ask the mayor if he wants to move it, because he and I were the people who presented to the select committee.
Okay, are there any comments in regards to this?
Sorry, yeah, Madam Chair, sorry, just trying to find my unmute button there. Yeah, if it hadn't been moved already, I'm happy to move it. Yeah, that's all I need to say.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm more happy to speak it.
Okay, moved by Mayor Gary Kuchar, seconded by councillor Hopkins. Put it to some questions or queries. Councillor Blackwood.
I just wanted to make a comment that I'm really pleased to see in this submission the comment around lifespan of a water service delivery plan and the recommendation around extending the time frame from 10 to 30 years. Because you know, as we're all aware, the financial burden that the outcomes of this will place on our end consumers is a serious matter that needs addressing.
Thank you for your comments. Any other queries, questions, replies? All right, we're ready to put this to a vote. Okay, all in favour of the recommendation that council formally ratifies Waitaki District Council submission on local government water services preliminary arrangements bill as submitted to the Finance and Expenditure Committee on the 30th of June 2024. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Okay, that is carried. Thank you.
Six point four. 10 minutes.
I'm going through our time very fast. That's why we're looking for another decision. Okay, let's go to 6.4. We have the Canterbury Climate Change Partnership Plan, final action plan. Thank you. Welcome to Mr. David Campbell.
Madam Chair, if I may, just a question from the public here, for getting blue in the face. 6.1 is skipped.
No. We will be leaving a bit more time for that one. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have two recommendations here that are put through to council. Number one, acknowledging that Huriri Community Board's endorsement of the final draft Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan at its meeting on the 1st of July 24, and also endorsing the final draft Canterbury Climate Partnership Plan is contained in the attachment as participating council. I'll pass it to Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just while we wait for Chelsea, a reminder, this has been in front of both the Huriri Community Board and Council at various times throughout the last 6 months or so. Sort of an evolving plan where ECAN are leading the project. Obviously, it affects our Canterbury part of the district. And essentially, they've now got this kind of finalised plan document, which is more the public facing aspect. All this strategic framework and the actions have already been considered. Feedback's provided both from the board and this council to ECAN, so it has evolved as a result of that. And really this part is to get the final tick off of the, I guess, more sort of public facing document, which was attached as well. So essentially it's had a good go over by all councils, and this is kind of the last chance to see what's going out to the public, essentially. I'm aware the CEO might have also attended a meeting recently that this was discussed as well, just in terms of across Canterbury CEs. But it's going to another mayoral meeting very soon as well to kind of get that final governance sign off across the region.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cowles, you have some comments to make?
Yeah, look, we've had plenty of engagement on this, and we had the engagement up at the Odamatara Community Hall right at the start, which was heartening to see a number of inputs from both our rural community and from the other stakeholders. It has come back across the community board, and I'll be happy to move forward with this and recommend move the recommendations that we have in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Blacklock.
Yeah, I just had a question. Thanks, Deputy Mayor.
Madam Chair, I think you should call for a second first.
My apologies. Do we have a seconder? Then I will give it back to Councillor Blacklock. So moved by Councillor Cowles. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ryan. And Councillor Blacklock, I'll bring it back to you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, or Ms. Clyde, on page 124 of the document, there's figure 1, Canterbury's greenhouse gas emissions 2021. There's a pie chart there that shows agriculture contributing 61% overall. Given the recent intentions of the government to engage a working group on analysis in the space of the possible overstatement of that figure, I was just wondering if there'd been any feedback from the wider group around the need to reflect on the appropriateness of that.
No, I guess it's a snapshot in time and picked up the measurement at that period 2021. It's also in carbon dioxide equivalent. So depending on what you measure, it can give different results, whether it's methane or the CO2 measurement. So I think a lot of the focus on agriculture is around the methane aspect, as opposed to this. So yeah, if the government changes what's being measured or how it's measured, then that would obviously potentially tweak those type of diagrams or measurements going forward. But this is an historical point in time measurement from 3 years ago.
So I guess for me, that's the issue, is that the spotlight has been put specifically on the methane matter, and obviously the current way of calculating the methane emissions in agriculture is the GWP 100 methodology, which is what's been currently used. But my understanding is the working group that's been put together with modelling oversight will be exploring other ways of reflecting methane output from agriculture. And so my concern is that this document could potentially overstate what is actually reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's not produced by us, it's ECAN's document. They've got the data, they've obviously explained how it's been measured. Yeah, if future trends changed as a result of measurement techniques, and that'll come through, as well as any reductions across various sectors. I don't think it's probably going to change the overall kind of rough proportions. It'll just tweak the actual percentages.
Thank you. Councillor McCone, followed by Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I had two concerns. Councillor Blackler's already covered off that first one very well, but the second one is the financial considerations too, and it just says costs have been allocated on a pro rata basis. Could we have a bit more definition on that, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Through the annual plan deliberations, there was a small amount set out for this year. I think it was 7,500 for this council, so that's proportionate to our size. And then going forward, it'll be put into the LTP going forward for the next 2 years for this. It does ramp up a little bit, but it's in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands for us. We pay a proportion based on population, similar to like Waitaki and other small councils. So the bulk's picked up by ECAN and the larger councils.
Okay, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, I'll speak to this when the matter goes to vote. I'll just ask a question at the moment. On page 127 or 128, there's a map, and that map shows what appears to be the Canterbury area substantially in green, but then there's a dotted area of coastal identification moving almost down to Cape Wombrau itself. Now, as far as I'm aware, that's not part of the ECAN area. Is it the intention of this document to incorporate policies for the total green mapped area in that dotted line coastal portion that's shown on the map?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hopkins. So indeed, the darker shade green area is the Canterbury portion. They've indicated the dotted area in white for the rest of the Waitaki district that's in Otago. So the document's applying for the Canterbury part, not the Waitaki part, south of the Waitaki River and up to the inland boundary just east of Duntroon.
Can I just add to that? I mean, previously as a council, you've discussed, and I don't think you've made a formal resolution on this, but you've discussed about, the challenges of working within two regional boundaries and not wanting to have two separate, climate change plans with separate sets of rules. So the team are working on looking at how we can harmonise over the district so that essentially we've got one plan for the district. And subsequent to that, the ORC has changed its approach as well. And so instead of developing a plan for the region involving councils. It's developing a plan for the regional council, which we are, effectively engaged in consultees in.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Queries? We already had a mover and a seconder. Anyone else want to speak to that? Councillor Hopkins.
Look, very briefly, Madam Chair, the document is quite general. And it gives us, I think, quite a lot of room to manoeuvre and to actually exercise our own individual judgment. The outcomes appear on page 20 or 120 or 121. The 10 actions are very broad. But one or two things that I would challenge in there, Councillor Blackman mentioned methane. I notice on page 125 or 126, there's a reference to the fact that hundreds of years human beings have been pumping more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Well, that takes no account of the mini ice age, nor the fact that 65 million years ago, the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 30%. And there were more trees and bigger animals than there've ever been. So this notion of constantly stigmatizing human contributions to climate change, I find at least contestable. But I think that, as I've said already, the document with principles and so forth and a summary of what our current council commitments have been and are, I'm quite comfortable that we've got a lot of flexibility and autonomy within the framework to actually exercise our judgment in future.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Hopkins. We have Mayor Gary Kuchar.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've circulated a proposed additional clause which recognises what Mr. Palmley talked about, the difficulties of working across two regions. I find it, not very sensible to actually have our district split in two around what climate change measures might be taken, and it's really requesting that we continue to lobby the ORC to have similar standards as our ECAN part, so that we're not stuck in the middle between two. It also recognises, or it's intended to recognise the challenge that we do have with basically having our staff having to work twice as much on this particular issue because we've got to deal with two regional councils. So we're just really seeking some common sense. So I'm happy to move this after the other is put, or if the mover and seconder wish to add it on, happy for them to do that. So, and it would say that 3, in our work with ORC, so the council starts with that council, in our work with ORC on their climate change plan, continues to advocate for similar standards, that similar standards apply to that part of our district as they do for our ECAN part.
Okay, do the movers and the seconders agree to include that as a third recommendation?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I'll be happy to add that as a third recommendation.
Okay, and seconded also by Councillor Ryan. Okay, so now we have 3 recommendations there. Are we ready to put this to a vote? Okay, those all in favour of the 3 recommendations that are in front of us? So okay, against? All right, that is carried. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That brings us to this part of the meeting. What we're going to do now is just have a very quick morning tea break. I am very mindful that we have people in our public gallery that are here anticipating discussion about 6.1 as well. So what we will do is we will pause our meeting and we will bring it back in just a few minutes' time.
Madam Chair, if I may, and also address Mr. Farley, just a practical thing. You are very well spoken. I've got hearing aids, and a lot of us is. How hard will it be for council to install a couple of speakers where the public is usually heard to in this area here, so you can get yourself or like Mr. Campbell has also partly spoken, where we can actually hear what you say. We can perfectly hear Mayor Kircher over those speakers here, but we're struggling to hear what you're saying.
Thank you. We'll see what's in the budget, shall we?
Oh, I'm happy to pay for it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will pause our meeting. Thank you very much. We will just have a morning tea break and we'll be back at 10:45 a.m. Thank you. And then one. Okay, warm welcome again. After a morning tea break, we will go straight into 6.1 on page 14. Okay, thank you. Am I putting this straight to you, Mr. Kimball?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report is come through as a result of the last District Plan Review Subcommittee meeting on the 20th of June, in which a series of resolutions were considered by the subcommittee. Some were related directly to recommendations relating to the proposed plan provisions and chapters, etc. They will form part of an overall report to council when all of those relevant chapters and maps, etc., are finalised by the committee in terms of recommendations. So that will be a conclusive report on the proposed district plan. We haven't got a date set for that yet because we've got another meeting in August of that subcommittee to consider the maps. As part of that report, there will be the Section 32 reports that have been discussed, so that all of the council will see the required Section 32 reports. They'll form part of the agenda and be publicly available as well. That is an RMA requirement, so they'll be produced as part of that. So what we've got today is essentially recommendations that relate to specific actions that effectively don't impact on that next phase of the plan report to council. One is around the feedback that's come in since December last year, and obviously since the April cutoff as well, and that was discussed in terms of the letters. The other is around some early indications from the government, in particular Associate Minister Hoggard, on the work around SNAs, which we've acknowledged in terms of not commencing any new SNA work. So we're very clear that that's the direction that's been set, and we're not committing to that. Our budgets going forward have been reduced in that space as well. So effectively, it was just acknowledging that advice and deciding what we've already got as status quo, leaving that in the draft plan as recommended. And then the third relates to the clarification around the heritage items for Category B heritage item owners that are newly nominated. And that was just a kind of reminder letter that would be sent after this, if this goes through, in terms of reflecting the previous 2019 resolution of council relating to those building owners. So effectively, they're kind of operational matters to work through. They're not really impacting on the full proposed district plan. These are follow-ups from that committee meeting to do some actions while we still work through the last lot of reporting to the subcommittee in August. As a side note, I know there's still some other matters we're working on that will come back to the subcommittee around other areas of refinement, particularly some of the ONF work on the Waitaki River feature, some other very site-specific zoning requests, etc. So they're very specific that have been to the subcommittee. Work is still ongoing for those. We're still providing maps and data files, shape files, etc. to people that request them, and working through those in the meantime. So it's not a stage where we're not doing any work. It's a lot of stuff still ticking away in the background. The Section 32s are being prepared. So this work here in front of us is really just operational, following through on the subcommittee's recommendations on those matters. So very limited in terms of scope compared to the whole plan. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Campbell. Questions, and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Campbell, there's been some angst in the public arena when these minutes were circulated, and I think some of it possibly comes from the language that was used. So when we talk about the, and I'd like to go specifically to the first statement on purpose. The purpose of this report is to convey specific resolutions from the District Plan Subcommittee. which I agree with. But it then goes on to say, for a council decision is required as soon as practicable to enable actions to be completed in a timely manner. I suspect that the public think that that involves notification of the plan. So can you again reiterate that this is simply an internal housekeeping matter and has nothing to do with the ultimate?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. So the actions to be completed are relating to these recommendations only. So it's the letters, et cetera, that are going out. Yeah, obviously we're pausing the SNA works. There's no action there in terms of doing any more work on that space. But yeah, it's essentially just those kind of 2 tranches of letters that we're working on. So it's not a full district plan action at all. And as I said, there's still another district plan subcommittee meeting coming up in August anyway, so there's further work to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Holden.
Mr. Chair, for Ms. Campbell, just could you just give a brief overview of the evaluation of the Section 32? Does that address like a lot of the different things the submitters have raised about equity and CVs? Is that part of the process of taking that all into entirety?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holding. So the RMA prescribes what a Section 32 report must contain, and it's around the costs and benefits of various provisions. So it's maps, rules, etc. So if a rural zone permits farming, or it says, well, there's no cost to the landowner to carry on farming, it's permitted. If they're required to get consent for a certain thing, whether it's a solar panels or a shed or something like that, then there's a consent cost burden to the landowner or consent applicant. Same in the residential area. If someone wants to build a bigger house or closer to the neighbour, the rules are saying that there'd be a cost involved in that and getting consent. So it's the same across all the suite of provisions. So the Section 32 report will be on all of the chapters individually. It's not a global one. It's covering off each one individually. So it'll be tailored to those specific areas. What the RMA is clear about is it doesn't include economic effects on property values. So that's I guess a political decision in terms of how much sort of weight you put on protecting certain values, whether it's heritage or environment, versus the economic impact that'll have. It will flag though that if there is an overlay or a heritage listing, that there is potentially a cost to someone to do something that falls outside what's permitted. So it'll be clear in terms of what those thresholds are.
Thank you. We have Councillor Hopkins, then Councillor Blackler and Councillor Bryan.
Yeah, look, three questions, in fact, and I'll take my guidance from you, Madam Chair, as to how they're asked. Ms. Campbell, you said that the Section 32 report needs to be produced. My understanding is that will have to be part of the notification process. If I look at all of the things that are still to do, and the fact that the District Plan Review Subcommittee has now said, and having received planning advice, that experts draw maps and ordinary people can't argue with them, that our focus could be and should be on the objectives, policies and rules. Would my assessment that we would be at least 4 months away from notification, even if we decided today we were going to do it? Would that be correct in your view?
So I've looked at the timeframes in terms of when the subcommittee and then obviously council decides to notify. You're probably looking at a good 6 to 8 weeks in terms of from that date to get it notified. So depending on when council makes that call, you've got that sort of 6 to 8 week lead in time.
But we'd have to see all the minutes first. All that material would have to have gone through the council process. So my view is we're at least 4 to 5 months away. Would you accept that as reasonable?
Well, we know there's another subcommittee meeting in August. That's late August. So we're at least close to a month from that. It depends on the outcome of that meeting, whether we then get a direction to proceed. It would be a squeeze to probably get it notified before Christmas. It is a possibility, depending on how much urgency you place on it. But you could make that call either way.
Right, so possible notification before Christmas if we put the pedal to the metal. The submission process itself, there's a minimum of at least 3 months for that, is there not? And then there's another period subsequent to that for subsequent submissions or further submissions on the submissions and the cross submissions.
So the RMA prescribes a minimum of 40 working days, which is, I guess, 2 months roughly. If you are notifying over Christmas, the working days stops on the 20th of December and recommences on the 10th of January. But I think given that period, you probably want to extend it longer than the 40 working days because a lot of people are away into January. Then there's a gap when summary submissions is prepared, and then there's a further 20 working day period for further submissions to be made. As a minimum, you can set longer if you want.
Third question, is it correct that we have a fund that enables urban people to actually seek financial assistance from the council for heritage improvements based on the public good? And is there any equivalent opportunity for rural persons who wish to protect outstanding natural landscapes or so forth to actually have funding of their resort consent processes met by the public or the wider community on the basis that that too is a public good? And are we intending to incorporate that possibility in the plan? And are we also intending to convey to government the fact that it would be a damn good thing if they considered it as well?
Yes, very good question, Councillor Hopkins. So we have 2 funds at the moment, contestable funds, a heritage fund and a biodiversity fund. We also have a heritage fee waiver, which is a smaller pot of money for where applicants are seeking to maintain and improve heritage buildings, and that's the only consent they need, then the fee waiver is applied to that. You could certainly promote as a non-regulatory measure any type of fee waiver or fund subject to council coming up with the money to provide it. We do know that probably over a year ago, government was consulting on a biodiversity credits system. So again, that was kind of like the climate change credits model. So whether that comes to fruition, we're not sure, but there's certainly room to advocate for that at a higher level. There's also regional council funds for RLC is quite a big eco fund that's a lot of money's been allocated to the Pleasant River work down in Wahimo. So yeah, it's not just us that has those type of funds.
I do have one more question if you allow it.
One more and then
Yeah.
I'll take it to Councillor Blackler.
Mr. Campbell, how close are we? I know that the District Plans Review Subcommittee asked you to produce a report looking at the options of notifying all the plan or part of the plan with certain chapters left out for this at present. How close are we and the public to seeing your conclusions on that matter?
So we are preparing that advice. It'll be a decision in terms of whether it's a public session to debrief on that advice or whether you want it in a public excluded session. But that could be tabled in August, same time as the other meeting. But it really depends on the nature of how you want to receive it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blackler, then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to tack in a quick supplementary to Councillor Hopkins' second last question. What's the appropriate mechanism by which we would achieve such an initiative around establishing a pot of money? Would that be through the revenue and finance policy stuff, through the LTP? Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, my question was around the SNA situation with respect to the Associate Minister for the Environment leader, and I just wondered, it's slightly separate to this matter, but I think it's a significant issue for rural our rural community, and that one of the key matters that the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity kind of addresses or seeks to put controls in place is around land that sits outside of the SNAs. And I was just wondering what the implications are around the intentions or apparent direction we might be heading in terms of where those rules might sit going forward.
Yeah, so at the moment, the plan rules are split where they have a set for the ECNA mapped areas, the rules around those. There's also rules that deal with the non-mapped ECNA areas and other Indigenous biodiversity, but like we have at the moment in the current plan. We do know there's in the second RM bill government's putting forward, there's probably going to be some tweaks to that NPS as well. So we expect that there'll be some refinement of what they mean at a national level. Depending on what stage our plan's at, we can adjust that either through a variation or plan change to amend it if needed. So it's basically we would align with what the NPS says. At the current moment, we are aligned with what all the national direction states. Until that's kicked in terms of a new set of rules, then we would amend it as we go.
So if we were to adopt the plan, based on decisions made at a future date, would we during that period between proposed and fully notified, would it be likely that we would have some clear guidance in that space in between times, do you think, or not?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blackford. It very much depends on the timing of what is released from government, because their normal process is it goes out for consultation. So you'll get an idea of what's coming. Then it can take quite a while to go through select committee and then be gazetted. So depending on when it's gazetted is when it actually has effect. If we get a good steer early on, we can probably start working on a variation to say when this is gazetted, we will change the plan at or near that time, because they normally have a period of time you have to make changes. So we could at least get an early steer. The final outcome might not be known for quite a period of time until it's gazetted as a change, but at least we'll be ready to change our plan.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan, and then Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just was not sitting on the subcommittee and unable to read the minutes like the public. I just wondered if I get some clarification, perhaps through the chair of the subcommittee. There was a Kate McGregor raised a point earlier about the letters that have been sent out by the CE and whether that was an appropriate response. So just wondering, is that in line with the recommendations made at the subcommittee, or could I just get some clarification on that process?
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. The appropriate in terms of in the meeting package, the actual amendments that were proposed and passed at the DPRSC are actually listed there. And again, without they're cherry picked out, and the balance of the conversation is not around them, that would possibly put some context around the discussion. So I believe that there was an intention, but whether it's actually been delivered in the way that the intention was, possibly is a moot point.
Okay, I'll take it to Councillor Cowles first. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Campbell, just with the fact that we do have new legislation, coming in, and I know that at the moment the signalling is around SNAs, but could be a lot wider than that through the entire RMA. I guess my question is financially. We obviously, we hear regularly that we're in a stage where our ratepayers, and all ratepayers are paying for this equally, are squeezed. I guess my question is continuing any of the work in those areas at the moment, while we don't know where that legislation might go, would that be, I don't know in my mind whether I would be looking at continuing to investing in that, not understanding how many changes and what the changes might mean further down the track. I was just wondering what your view was on that side of things, and I guess what the financial implications could be if we have massive changes in. I understand the government's looking at September next year of trying to have this through and sorted. Obviously, that can vary, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowles. I guess a lot of our cost has already been spent today in terms of the advice on various matters. There's obviously cost in notifying and having hearings, submissions, etc. We're kind of at that stage, a bit like our neighbours to the north, Mackenzie and Timaru, where they are actually going through hearings now. So they're already committed. They're going to be in the same position as us, albeit we're slightly later if we notify. So if they issue decisions and then government changes the rules, they'll still have to change their plan. We may, if we don't notify a plan, we will probably have to change our operative plan anyway in some shape or form. So it's kind of that overall aspect. Other councils like Sir Ashburton are in the stage of starting or thinking about starting a review. They're probably would pause at the moment. They are seeking advice from the ministry on whether they should start that until this change comes through, because that's where you are spending the money doing that upfront work. We've kind of got to the point of, we've had a lot of meetings to go through all the provisions. We've got them kind of through most of the subcommittee stages. So it's kind of that next phase of committing to notifying and hearing submissions, etc. Whatever changes come through, we would have to adjust regardless. It's just the timing really in terms of whether it's changing or varying a proposed plan versus changing an operative plan. So it's costs either way.
And just supplementary to that, if we were to have to make some major changes, do we have to go through the submission processes and all of that side of it again as well?
A good question. It very much depends on how the government proposes or requires changes to be made. Some of them, like the parking standards that we took out, were just a straight change with no formal submission process. So they can legislate to say, if it's a change of that kind of nature, just go and do it in a certain period, versus other changes where they might require you to go through a formal RMA process. So a lot of the time we won't know what they look like. If they set national direction, for example, the granny flat national standard they're talking about, which will come to you as a consideration as a submission, that would just be a standard that sits over and above any district plan anyway. So you'd have to give effect to it like we do for contaminated soil standards. So you wouldn't necessarily have to change the plan for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question from Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I guess my question is to either Mr Campbell or Mr Palmley. Would you accept that it may be possible to actually conclude that the letters that have been sent to date to landowners, both in response to those who submitted between 18 Dec and 18 April and those who submitted afterwards, I noticed that the District Plan Subcommittee Resolution 1B recommends to Council that the Chief Executive is directed to respond. Now, at this stage, that vote is in front of us today. Is it reasonable to assume, therefore, that the letters that have been sent to date may have been sent prematurely, and that subsequent to today, it might be possible for additional letters to be sent that may include new or alternative information determined by the Council at this meeting?
So with any of these resolutions, you can ask for additional things to be done, as well as what's put forward by the subcommittee. So it's not out of the question that you could ask for other correspondence to be sent to the same grouping of people.
Thank you for that. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, very grassroots question, Mr Campbell. With all submissions made to the draft district plan and the lack of sort of, will I say, culmination and satisfaction from the answers from the planning and the council on those submissions, and then we are being told that we should be notifying the draft plan, which would then create the same scenario again of submissions. What I'm getting at is that if you cannot, or if we cannot as council, as staff, supply the answers and the solutions to the satisfaction of the submitters on the, at some stage, devastating effects on their properties in all ways, financially and farming and future and production, if we don't solve those problems prior to going to notification and then repeat the process again, I'm not quite understanding what that is all about. Perhaps I haven't put myself very clearly. I haven't. It's just, anyway, whatever you can answer, please do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Percival. I think I get the gist of your concern, and I guess that's that kind of iteration of the first round was feedback in 2022. The recommendations to the subcommittee responded to that feedback, and there was changes made. Sometimes there weren't changes made because there were ones that we didn't recommend because they weren't aligned with the direction or what we could change under the RMA. So certain parameters, I guess, we have to work in. That's kind of the key starting point. There has been quite a bit of review in terms of mapping in certain areas. Obviously, not everyone's happy of the outcome. That's just the nature of those type of discussions. And there is still that next phase where it's a formal submission process. Remember, this was a feedback process, not a formal submission process. And that's where decisions are made on that submission, and that is appealable to the Environment Court. So it's kind of saying, as Councillor Hopkins mentioned earlier after the public forum, that there are those multiple steps involved that people can, I guess, lobby or advocate for their position in terms of in front of a hearings panel that make the decision. So if a proposed plan is basically proposed, it's not final. People have still got at least 2 cracks at it, if not 3, to try and get what they want. So this phase is really about that feedback loop to try and refine as much as we can. It's getting to a stage where it's, we could keep doing this for months and months, but how much do we invest in that?
Thank you. I'll have Mr. Parney and then followed by Councillor McCone and Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of comments to what Mr. Campbell said there, really, and that is to recognise that the planning policy framework we are working within is not set by us, it's set by Parliament. They make the overall rules. Now, in terms of what happens locally, that's, there is, a degree of interpretation of those rules. But nevertheless, we need to sit within those rules. So I think we need to manage our expectations as to, our ability to, satisfy all people in terms of the interpretation of those rules. It is a fact that ever since, planning came in, the national government's put in planning regimes that, landowners, there have been, winners and losers from that. And I think what we're talking about here is the interpretation of the rules, but nevertheless, the rules still stand from Parliament. We have indications from the government that they are looking to change those, but we don't have the details of that. We don't have certainty around the timetable of that. And we are required to review our district plan. And it has been a considerable time in progress, and it's not the end of that process. We've got a considerable way to go in which people continue to be able to have their say.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCone?
Yeah, look, I'm sort of half quite confused and everything else, but the letter that, well, what we're asked to resolve, that's already gone out. So that's history and that's done. But I think we could do with changes. But look, at the end of the day, what is the rush? We've had political direction signalled and the national standards could be changed. The ORC are going through their policy changes. We've got to get this right. And I feel myself, we're sidestepping our responsibilities and taking the easy options to move forward. There's a whole lot of decisions out there, if, buts, maybes, and we could waste a whole lot of time doing a whole lot of stuff that actually could change further down the track. We're not under timelines as such, but we are under pressure to get it right. As an elected representative, I feel we could do better and progress this with a foundation of fact and information to all parties and not leave it to those affected to object to prove a process which is not definitive, but maybe potentially legally binding. You know, it's easier to work together for a result rather than against each other. And I think we have an opportunity to do that at minimal cost now to get all involved and get a solution, be it amicable or effective across the board.
Thank you for that, councillor McCone. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think following up on councillor McCone's sentiment, and it's more just some comments around this. I believe, in a governance space, there's two areas here. I think, some of the decisions obviously for the subcommittee to make, but I'd just like to make some comment here. For me, I feel that my job is to look out in the longer term. I sit in a regulated business myself. If I look at regulation that was coming in and making decisions now, knowing that new regulation was going to come in and change that landscape a whole lot, I probably wouldn't be making the decisions now, knowing that that is coming. My understanding is about 13 months before we get some new legislation that is proposed by the government. Are we using our time and resources for all of our ratepayers effectively in times of financial pressure? You don't have to look too far to see the pressures that are already on a rural community, and there's some of the effects that it's having around mental health and all of those other things, plus also financially at the moment. It's a pretty grim time overall with our economy. The risk, for me, there's risk either way. There's no great outcome from wherever we head here. There'll be some, there'll be affected properties. There'll be, we're trying to get something across the line here that's never ever going to be 100% correct. But the risk of being legally challenged and reputationally and morally, I would certainly echo the thoughts that I'd like to be on our constituent side. And so I guess where I'm heading, it's not something I believe we can probably move forward here today, but I'd like the consideration of perhaps parking this until we have clearer direction from our central government.
Thank you for that. I'll take it to councillor Thompson, actually.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, councillor Kells. I do hear and understand the sentiment, but can I just bring council back to focus on the job in hand? We are having some philosophical discussions here that will have to be had, but what we have in front of us today is some recommendations from the last DPR subcommittee that council can either ratify or reject. And I readily acknowledge that those decisions made at the DPR were not unanimous. There was a member of the committee who voted against them. So I think that whilst we would like to discuss our strategies going forward, we actually need to progress the recommendations to council first, and allow the subcommittee to react to the recommendations of the planning advice that we're waiting on, and then come back with a recommended strategy to council as to how we progress, park, rescind, whatever we need to do with the district plan will be as a consequence of those future meetings.
Thank you for that, councillor Thompson. You're offering a bit of a pragmatic approach just to deal with this 6.1 report just for today. Just as a reminder, there is a subcommittee that has a job to do and that we won't be fully making all decisions right now. I just want to give the assurance to the public gallery that are here that there is a lot of things that we still need to go through. Councillor Hopkins, and then we need to do some work on the recommendation.
Madam Chair, in light of the comments made by the chair of the District Plan Review Subcommittee, with which I agree, I would like to move an amended version of the DPRSC Resolution 2024-089. I don't think we need to move 1A or 2A because they relate to the District Plan Review Subcommittee itself. So I will move as follows, that the council directs the chief. I'll move 1B with the addition of these words, that the council directs the chief executive to respond, etc., etc. And I'd move 2B with the same set of words that the council directs the chief executive to respond. And I would then move a third resolution that the council directs the chief executive to additionally engage with the rural reference group, landowners or their agents to advise on possible appropriate steps to resolve the issues of concern, that may resolve the issues of concern and confirm or modify the overlays shown on the draft district plan maps. So if somebody wants to second that, I'll speak via movement.
Okay, I'll take it to Mr. Powley first, please.
I just want to get a bit of clarity around the intent of that, because that could be interpreted a number of ways, including at its extreme, a full review of every single overlay could be the logical interpretation of that.
Well, yeah, look, I'd be happy to finish that third resolution at further engage with rural reference group, landowners or their agents to advise on possible appropriate steps to resolve the issues of concern. Full stop.
So you are amending your proposed.
Number 3, yeah.
All right, is there a seconder to that? This is in addition to the 2B. Yes, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Councillor Hopkins through the chair. Does this relate to the landowners referred to in 1A and 2A only, or all landowners? It's just not clear what the intent is there.
Well, first and foremost, it would relate to the landowners identified in 1A and 2A. But we have heard submissions this morning or representations this morning saying that some people are still confused or unhappy about the level of engagement and so forth. Now, and whether or not they have been properly consulted within their view. I don't think we can relitigate any of that. We don't have a time machine. But to the extent that there are processes in front of us and concerns expressed in front of us, in my view, it would be helpful and user-friendly and of benefit to local residents and ratepayers to actually outline in a little bit more detail than was provided in the original letter, steps they could take and measures they could employ to advance their case. I think it's really important that we do that, given the level of concern.
Was there a seconder to your? Okay, Councillor McCone.
Yeah, on that basis, I'll second that and speaking to it, that it's opening lines of communication that may resolve a lot of the issues that keep coming back to this table. At least we're having communication.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded, but I'll pass it over to Mr. Pundy.
Yeah, I think, a motion to engage further with landowners and rural reference group is, something that, is within our remit. But to start then us providing advice in terms of mitigating against what's proposed in our own plan, I think that takes us into an area that we shouldn't be in. If we provide advice and then we don't act on that when that comes back to us because the committee decides something else, I think it puts us in a very difficult position if we're then providing advice around mitigation. I think that's something that landowners need their own advice on, and puts us in a difficult position if we're doing that ourselves.
If I may speak to that, I accept the point you're making is valid. What is equally apparent, and in fact sadly equally apparent, is that the public generally throughout the country and here do not fully understand the process. They are not as familiar with the ins and outs and labyrinths of case law and the like. And my resolution says you simply advise on possible appropriate steps. Now, that doesn't, in my view, compromise the council. You could say we're not allowed to take sides or whatever, but here are things you could do. There's a method you could employ. If, for the sake of argument, we are obliged to accept that experts have precedence over lay people in terms of overlays and maps and so on, how do people actually access expertise, and where might that be done in an affordable way? My view is, at this stage, there is an unfortunate gap, literally in terms of the level of understanding of a very convoluted, arcane and esoteric process. And I think we need to demystify it and try to empower people by letting them know more clearly how they can actually effectively argue their case in court or present their case when it comes to the submission process. It is going to be a contest of ideas. It's a contest of ideas now. You know, nationally and locally, federated farmers will have a completely different view about what rules should apply for dairying than Greenpeace. And that argument is going to be there will be a debate about that at the submission process, whatever the rules are at the time. We have to actually accept, everyone has to accept that's what's going to happen. And there won't be a plan until it happens. So if we can empower people as much as possible so they are clearly aware of what they can do and how they can effectively mount their own case, all you're being asked to do is advise on possible appropriate steps. And I think you can actually exercise caution in terms of what you deem to be appropriate from the council's point of view.
Councillor McCone,
The word advise is very difficult in this context, and I think it's more together about sitting around a table and talking it out so there's a compromise between both sides that is amicable and sits within the parameters of the law. That's the way I read it.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fortunately, we're not North Korea. And we can have a debate on these subjects. I probably spent 4 hours yesterday involved in discussions with various parties, both round this table and outside it, on the district plan. Councillors are all accessible. We're all receiving and reading the emails and digesting the information. It's a process. We can't circumvent the process. Now, what we've heard is the whole gambit of reasons. And the bottom line is, well, we have 100% support for some of the emotions expressed. The emotions won't cut it in a planning process through to the Environment Court. We've actually got to get our heads around the fact we need to treat this and the process in a planning manner. And it is very easy then for the subcommittee to make decisions on substantive matters rather than emotion, because we can't justify it. So we can pontificate and navel gaze here all day, but we actually need to progress what's in front of us.
Mr. Kimball.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick reminder, we have also mentioned at various subcommittee meetings that we are proposing to have a friend of the submitter available for all submitters to access and help with preparing and lodging their submissions. There will be the online e-plan tool for that as well. So that is obviously a step that will be at no cost to submitters. Some people will obviously engage consultants, lawyers, etc., to do their submissions. That's their choice. But we have already mentioned before that would be one resource we will provide at no cost to submitters to help. So they're an independent person that can help people out.
Thank you for that. Councillor Blacklow, one more.
Mr. Campbell, I'm just asking this question because it would influence my support for 3 or not. The Friends of the Submitter initiative, could you just outline with a little bit of detail what that scenario might look like?
Yeah, so they're normally a sort of planning or legal expert that we employ they're not obviously a staff member or someone in council, and they can be accessible for a submitter to help, they have concerns, they help put it into their submission, work through the various provisions or maps that they need to focus on to say, this is the area of concern I have around my property or the maps on my land or the various rules. So they help them sort of tailor their submission to get the concerns into the format we need for the district plan hearing process.
So the friend of the submitter would essentially achieve or help the concerned resident achieve what Councillor Thompson is talking about, converting an idea or a thought into planning language so that it fits within the process from that point of view.
Yeah, correct. It's submissions generally say what relief you seek. So what changes do you want made? And they're trying to get to people to say, here's what the rule or the map should state for these reasons. They have to say what they want changed and for what reason. So it's putting it in those clear terms so that the hearings panel or people summarise it can go, oh yeah, that's clear what they want achieved, rather than say, I don't like the plan. That's not going to help anyone. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We have Mayor Garakucha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Mr. Campbell, just on the friend of the submitter. I just want to get clarification. We're talking about this is someone who will help someone make submissions on their own property, not on other, not necessarily a non-resident, not necessarily a non-ratepayer, and not about other people's properties. Is that right?
Thank you, Mikucha. It can be difficult to distinguish between the, I guess, what they're submitting on and for who. It's a bit like a consultant or a lawyer might be preparing a submission against some other person's land or an overlay or that type of thing. So I think it'd be quite difficult to pick and choose how they did that. You could try and set it up so that people provide proof of address or proof of ratepayer, that type of thing. If you really wanted to bind it that way, that could be an option to address that, where if people are kind of doing the submissions like an NGO or someone globally about a certain thing, then you might say, well, you go away and get your own expertise versus something that we're supporting for ratepayers only.
Thank you for that. Councillor. So you have a subsequent question?
I was just going to say that, if we're going to have ratepayers fund this service, I think it behoves us to make sure that it's ratepayers that it is funding, and that it is affected property owners that don't have necessarily access to those other sorts of resources. So I think I'm in favour of it. I just think when it comes to that point, that we need to make sure we've got good criteria that sit alongside it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Yeah, look, I commend the thought of that, but that to me is the last step. What I'm trying to get proposed and everything else is sit there and talk between each other and compromise before we get there, and we'll save a lot of time and money on both parties.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
I'm just wondering if you'd allow me to exercise a right of reply.
Yes.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how the council votes. I do believe that the resolution number 3 is sufficiently, if I said vague or sufficiently non-directive, to actually allow the advice to simply be, we're going to set up a friend of the submitters and here's how that can help and when it will be so on. I have not presupposed what advice might be able to be provided, and I totally accept Mr. Palmer's point about the need for the council to actually remain objective. And I believe that the resolution number 3 is worded in such a way as to allow that to happen, but for there to be a little bit more in the way of assistance tendered, or possible assistance tendered to landowners. I would note that some people, I think the first letter it was ultra vires because it was sent before the council actually had voted on the recommendation to allow the chief executive to direct the chief executive to send a letter. So I see no particular reason why there shouldn't be another letter sent subsequent to today, because at this point, we will have actually voted accordingly and incidentally retrospectively validated the letters that have already been sent. So I would ask and encourage councillors to actually support this, because I think it sends a signal of willingness to engage, assist, and also telegraphs the fact that we acknowledge that this is a really complicated issue, and that a lot of people don't have the benefit of all the expertise that planning lawyers and others have. And to the extent that we can help them actually acquire some of that expertise, the better the process will be.
Thank you. If we can just read the recommendations under DPRSC 2024-089.
Well, what I moved was that I moved 1B, that council directs the chief executive to respond, etc., etc. And I moved 2B, this is from the DPR subcommittee, 2B, that council directs the chief executive to respond to that one as well. And then I moved a third resolution, which was that the council directs the chief executive to further engage with the rural reference group, landowners and their agents to advise on possible appropriate steps to resolve the issues of concern.
Thank you.
Michael.
All right, so we have 3 recommendations.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, there was a word different in there, that council directs the CE to, the first time it was read, it was additionally engage.
Oh.
This time it was further.
Well, okay, I'd make it additional, I couldn't, I'm sorry, fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so under that particular section of this report, we have 3 recommendations. 1B as it stands, 2B as it stands, with an additional 3 that you have just read out. Are we ready to put that to a vote? Okay, so those all in favour of the 3 recommendations for that particular section? Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Okay, would you like that noted, councillor Blackler? All right. Okay, that is carried. There are other recommendations in this report that we're yet to go through as well.
And to accelerate, I would personally, I'm happy to move. I'm looking at 3A on page 15. I'm happy to move that council resolves to retain the previous resolution already in place. DPRSC 2023-042 decided that the DPRSC meeting held on 18 December 2023, and B recommends that council accepts Schedule 6, significant natural areas. And if it's seconded, all of the preamble relates to the district plan subcommittee. The only pieces I've read out essentially summarise the recommendation from the committee to the council.
Okay, so you are moving 3A and B under DP as worded.
Since you're taking out the pre.
Can you read that out clearly, please?
Yes, I'm moving 3A, but I'm deleting most of it. So
which bits are we deleting?
I will move that council resolves to retain. This is the last 2 lines, because that's the recommendation from the subcommittee. So I'm moving that council resolves to retain the previous resolution already in place. DPRSC 2023-042 decided that the DPRSC meeting held on 18 December 2023. And B recommends that council accepts Schedule 6 significant natural areas.
So that is the recommendations.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think B needs to take out recommends that council, because that council would be at the top. So effectively you're taking out all of the preamble in A so that it starts at.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and then B would be accept Schedule 6.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, and you move.
Yeah.
All right, is there a seconder? Oh, yes, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just noting the report on the page above, we've only sought that basically that part of 3A that Councillor Hopkins read out is the only resolution we're seeking to be considered by council. 3B will be included in the overall report on the proposed district plan. So we don't want to confuse it by splitting out that schedule from the rest of the schedules and chapters.
So it's only
It'd be
3A.
cleaner if it's left out of this.
Only 3A, yeah.
Okay, is there a seconder for 3A?
Could you just explain why you're removing the preamble, councillor?
Well, because if pursuant to the request and resolution DPRSC 2023-081.2 discussed in this report in response to, there's various references what the subcommittee will do and what the subcommittee might receive and so on. And the subcommittee acknowledges officer advice that the most appropriate response to the letter at this time is for the subcommittee to recommend. So the critical matter for the vote today is the recommendation from the committee, and that is to retain the previous resolution already in place, DPRSC 2023-042, decided at the DPRSC meeting held on 18 December 2023, full stop. If you want it all,
No, that's fine. I'll see.
All right, are we clear?
Happy to see you.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Blackler. We'll put it to a vote. Okay, those in favour of 3A? Those against? Okay, that is carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair, to progress this, if you allow me, I'd like to move a slightly amended version of the recommendation at the bottom of that page, which is shown in italic text at the bottom. And the wording I'm proposing to move today is that officers remind owners of heritage settings and category B heritage items listed in Schedule 2 that are not already listed in the operative district plan, that if they are opposed to a listing within 20 working days of being notified, then council would only consider listing their heritage setting or heritage item when the setting or item has received funding from council's Waitaki Heritage Fund.
Is that not exactly as it reads almost? Okay, is there a seconder for that slightly amended motion? Can you reread that again, Councillor Hopkins?
I move it that officers remind owners of heritage settings and category B heritage items listed in Schedule 2 that are not already listed in the operative district plan, that if they are opposed to a listing within 20 working days of being notified, then council would only consider listing their heritage setting or heritage item when the setting or item has received funding from council's Waitaki Heritage Fund. So that's a very minor variation of what was moved by Councillor Blackler and seconded by Councillor Winwood.
Okay, that is moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded. Oh, sorry, Christian. And then David Campbell.
Through you, Madam Chair, a question for Councillor Hopkins. I think the insertion of heritage setting is a substantive change from this motion. Can you explain what you're talking about in terms of heritage setting?
Well, indeed, again, just responding to people's concerns and attempts to actually get dialogue going. There's been ongoing debate, and some of us may have seen it, about a particular heritage setting, HH131, and the amendment would allow that setting to be considered because it is listed in Schedule 2 and not already listed in the operative district plan. So it's a pretty narrow expansion of the intention of the original resolution, but it does address, again, I think appropriately, one or two concerns that have been raised by residents and ratepayers and landowners.
Okay, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification, are the heritage settings also applicable to category B items that they surround? I'm just clarifying what extent of those we're talking about.
Well, sorry, Mr. Campbell, my view on that, I don't mean to be confrontational here, but if officers had a concern about the scope of the implications of owners, reference to owners of category B heritage items, you should have shared that with us at this meeting today. Now, there's been no comment as far as I can see, and there's been no comment as far as I can see in the agenda from officers saying that they would recommend that the resolution originally moved by Councillor Blackler and seconded by Councillor Linwood and very slightly modified by myself should not be passed. And my view is, I can't answer your question because I feel, in fact, if you had concerns, you should have raised them with us yourself in advance of this meeting.
You can respond.
I think it was misinterpreted. The heritage settings apply to around all heritage items. And the resolution that the subcommittee was talking about was a narrow set of category B items that are newly listed. So I'm seeking to clarify if that also includes the heritage settings around those same items or all of the heritage settings in the district plan.
No, it only relates to the ones that are actually captured by the wording in that motion.
I think it probably needs a wee slight tweak just to reflect that.
Okay, but you understand the intent?
We need to be clear, so it is only heritage settings for category B items as well as category B items. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so you moved that. Did we have a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor McCone. We'll put it to a vote. Those in favour of 8. Recommendation 8.
Aye. Sorry.
Oh, we'll put it to a vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, against? All right, that is carried.
Madam Chair, I wonder if you'd allow me to move one further resolution or recommend a resolution. I'd like to test the mood of the meeting on this. I would like to move, and I hope somebody seconds it if only pro forma. I'd like to move that the planning manager is requested to oversee a review of all objectives, policies and rules pertaining to areas identified as ONLs, ONFs and SASMs in the proposed district plan with a view to producing a revised suite of measures better aligned with the current government's stated RMA reform intentions.
I think that's a question that we need to put back to the subcommittee to discuss when they do meet. Yes, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that flavour of that draft resolution was actually discussed at the last district plan review subcommittee. So that was the second part of the advice sought there. So I think we'd cover that if needed.
Okay, yes, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand the sentiment that Councillor Hopkins is expressing, but the thing is, you are correct. It is a matter for the subcommittee to consider. And members of the subcommittee are on record on the basis of the planning advice that we received that we could not alter mapping overlays, or that us altering them would not stand up within the Environment Court. But we do have control over what goes on within those settings, and it will certainly be the intention of the subcommittee members to vigorously explore all options in that space.
Thank you. I think that brings us to all of the recommendations that we need to put through and discuss for decision report 6.1.
Would you allow just?
I think we're going to close off this part because it's been over an hour that we have. So we've given it sufficient robust time, and I appreciate everybody's input, their contribution. But we also need to go through the process in terms of putting it back to the district plan subcommittee to further discuss other other issues and also feedback from the public that we've received today? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that good discussion. All right, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. 6.5 Harbour Operations, page 165.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assistant and listening to our roads and joining us.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 7 recommendations. We're ready to go.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Hopefully this item's slightly more straightforward. So the primary reason why you're seeing this is, as noted in the report, the Otago Regional Council has made the decision to place far more emphasis and resources into their coastal responsibilities. One of those is reviewing coastal consents, of which the council holds one of those. So the regional council has been very proactive and positively in engaging with council and discussing the issues that they see attached to the coastal consent that is the subject of this report. So council, did get this consent in 2014 and has taken an approach of really passing on the conditions to the people that own the moorings and then expecting them to comply. We believe this complied with the requirements of the consent. And there has been very good compliance by some parties, particularly those associated with North Otago Yacht and Powerboat Club, but less compliance with some of the other mooring owners. So in the discussions with the regional council, they made it very clear that all of the obligations sit directly with council and cannot be passed on to a third party. This has really caused this report to be written and to really focus on the issues that the clarity from the regional council makes it very clear that there are potential significant financial and other liabilities that will sit with council if it continues to be the consent holder. Therefore, the recommendation is that council really passes on these consents and either surrenders them or gets the individual mooring holders to allow us to transfer the consent to them. So that's a summary of the issues. Really pass it across to the other officers to give any further clarification, but very happy to answer questions on this issue because it is historic and there are a number of factors in here.
Thank you. Okay, any questions? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to commend staff for the work that they've done in this space. And I see the arguments as outlined totally acceptable, and I would be happy to move the recommendations.
Okay, before we move on, did you have a question, Councillor?
I do have a couple of questions, if I may. Well, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. If we're going to do this, and we're going to do it in public, it does seem to me quite important that people understand certain risks. So can you, on page 166, you talk about how we have attempted to pass the obligations regarding the moorings onto structure owners through a licensing agreement, but you then go on to say that the responsibility still sits with us because we hold the consent. But is that legal advice, and to what extent could we challenge it or contest it if we did try to actually hold an individual mooring owner to account rather than accept responsibility ourselves?
Through the chair, we do have advice with respect to the sub-licensing agreement. That advice has indicated that if any non-conformances were to be found, the sub-license agreement actually wouldn't transfer responsibility for those non-conformances over to the sub-licensor. It would sit wholly with council as the coastal consent holder. What the sub-license agreement essentially does is outline expectations of those whose moorings we hold a consent over. However, we have no ability to enforce those, nor does it limit our liability to any extent.
So it is fair to say we have a situation in the harbour where there is a not inconsiderable risk to the public. A boat breaks its mooring and it doesn't just bang into the breakwater, it actually crashes into 3 other boats. And all of those costs would sit with us or with ratepayers. And so that therefore there is a potentially a very significant cost, that exposure to possible cost for ratepayers in the harbour at the moment. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
Through the chair, if the mooring was found to be deficient or ill-maintained, then council as coastal consent holder would be the ones who were found to be liable for that poor maintenance.
Thank you.
Another.
Hang on, I have Mayor Gary Kuchar with a question, and then Rebecca Ryan, and then Tim Blackler.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, just around, what is this applying to? We're talking about moorings. Does it extend to the berths on the wharf? And we also have heard from ORC referring to our harbour as their harbour. Are they going to be responsible for dredging? And just wondering where those activities sit with this particular decision. Thank you.
Through the chair, dredging is covered under whether or not ORC sees the Oamaru Harbour as a commercial harbour, but it also covers under the coastal plan. The coastal plan was issued in 2012. It is 2012. Sorry, it is due for renew in 2026, and there would be the opportunity to have a conversation around dredging and expectations.
Thank you.
In addition, just as this report is primarily pertaining to the moorings, yes. The coastal consent RM 14.098.01 does actually pertain to berthages as well as moorings. If that motion were to be moved, I would just request that it be updated to say agrees to relinquish coastal consent RM 14.098.01 as it pertains to moorings, so that we're very, very clear that we're not talking about berthages, we're only talking about the swing moorings here.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. What financial impact will there be on the individual mooring owners?
Through the chair, we haven't quantified what the financial impact is likely to be to the individual mooring holders. We've only quantified what council's financial impact would be. To an extent, individual mooring holders may be able to undertake further repairs themselves rather than calling upon external contractors to do so. And I suppose with council being the entity that is responsible for the moorings and whether they are in a good condition or not, we would want some guarantee that the moorings are fit for purpose. And because it's unknown what the weight of vessels are or the type of vessels are that are mooring against them to council, because it changes all the time, we, I suppose, want a mooring that is of a stronger nature or a higher specification. Whereas mooring owners themselves having the consent would mean that the size and specification of their mooring can be tailored to the type of vessel they might keep. So as an answer for you directly, I am not sure on what the quantum of cost to them would be, but I can say that the quantum will be larger for council than it would be for the individuals.
Thank you. Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Just regarding the sub-licensing agreement, I just wanted to understand, through the atmosphere, transfer moorings either across to the individual or back to ORC. Is there a requirement under that sub-licensing agreement for agreement from the other party, or are there provisions within that for us to, I guess are there matters that need to be addressed in that regard? And second to that, I just wanted to understand if so really the matter, there's basically two options for existing mooring holders if we proceed with what we're looking to adopt today, which is if they're not satisfied with the mooring, that they would be looking to take on personal ownership of. Their option would be to support us in handing it back to ORC. And I guess that leads to kind of one final sub question of that is who would be responsible for the moorings themselves if kind of handed back in terms of remediating anything that might be left?
Through the chair, I suppose for clarification, the moorings are currently primarily privately owned. So council owns 7 of them. The rest are all in private ownership. So even though we hold the coastal consent for them, they are already the property of individuals, which is one of the issues where essentially we've got limited control over what can and can't occur because of that. So as far as transferring of the coastal consent, we've been in discussions with ORC. They have indicated that that would be fine. Obviously, the owner of the mooring would have to agree to the transfer of the consent. If they didn't agree, they would either need to apply for a resource consent or remove their mooring because it essentially becomes an unconsented activity. That would be up to ORC to, I suppose, regulate rather than council. So they'd be then placed in that position. When it comes to council's moorings, we would be, the recommendation is to relinquish those particular moorings directly to Otago Regional Council. So they would then accept ownership of them and all maintenance obligation, etc. Given that council would essentially be removed from a number of the risk factors as well as a number of the cost factors that are relevant to this.
Sorry, I don't know how this one. The sub-licensing, are there any potential complications within the agreement that we currently have between us and mooring holders that need to be addressed, or it's quite simple in that regard?
No, I don't believe so. The sub-licensing agreement is there, as I said, in an effort to try to make clear the expectations of the mooring owners as far as their obligations, which again, we can't actually keep them to. If council is no longer the consent holder, then essentially the sub-licensing agreement is null and void because we're not sub-licensing anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got councillor McCone and then councillor Cowles.
So I suppose this is a Scottish question. So recommendation 5, not to impose mooring fees. So if we agree to this today, is that instantaneous or does it run for 12 months for that? How does it go? And secondly, is $15,000 as an estimate? That would be a top end estimate?
Through the chair, on your first question regarding mooring fees, yes, that would be for this financial year. Essentially, we invoice mooring fees annually each year around July. Given this was going to be coming up, we've withheld invoicing until we could have a discussion with council as to whether it wishes to continue. In regards to the second question regarding the funding of consent transfer fees, there is a flat rate of $200 per transfer. However, there's also administrative costs on top of that. So I think the $15,000 is a best estimate I'm unsure whether it might likely go a little bit above that. It really depends on the administrative portion that's going to be undertaken by OIC in the transfer of those fees. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowles.
Yeah, I was just going to second. I was happy to move forward with this and second that motion with the changes, as long as the mover was happy with Joshua's changes, Mr. Rendell's. We'll discuss this. The risk far outweighs anything else, and I think we need to get on and make sure that our risk is reduced.
Thank you for that. One more.
Yeah, just one very quick question, and I share Councillor Cowell's views and will vote for the recommendations as amended. But I'm just concerned on page 167, where we say that the actual users of some moorings are unknown or is unknown, and we can't require sales or any other arrangements to be registered. I mean, how on earth is this going to happen if we don't even know who's involved? I mean, and how many people, how many of the moorings are we scratching our heads and saying, no idea who owns that one?
Through the chair, there are 2 moorings that were in dispute about who owned it. Transfer of ownership hadn't been formalised or advised through council, but that is a minimal number. And in the event that we are unable to source the owner, we would transfer that back to council, back to ORC.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll go back to the recommendations. Originally, Councillor Thompson, you were ready, you're happy to move, and then. Okay, happy to move with the amendments, seconded by Councillor Cowles.
Sorry, just very quick, where's the amendment going? Which one of those 7 are we changing?
My request would be that number 1 reads, agrees to relinquish coastal consent RM 14.098.01 as it pertains to moorings.
So the scope is just for the moorings. Yeah. Okay, so that's seconded. Anyone want to speak to that or write a reply? We put it to a vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Okay, that is also yes, Mia Kucha.
I was just going to speak very much in support of this, and just to thank staff for bringing it to us. It is a significant risk if something goes wrong, and I'm just very happy to support it and very pleased to see that it's been voted through anyway. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, that is carried. Okay, we have agenda item. Thank you very much to our staff for coming along and for your work with this. Okay, agenda item 6.6, carry forward. Okay, shall I pass it over to Mr. Ho? Okay, so that's page 175, 6.6, carry forward report.
Thank you. This report is slightly different from the usual carry forward report. We have tried to present it in a more timely manner with some further information. Probably the key difference is what is proposed to be carried forward is significantly less than in prior years, because as part of the preparation for the long-term plan that turned into the enhanced annual plan, officers were told that if a project basically had no prospect of being started, or substantial work being done by at the end of the 24 financial year, then that project had to be resubmitted for consideration by the governance team. So that's why the actual amounts being suggested to be carried forward are significantly less than in prior years, and many of those projects have been carried forward and are reflected in the approved project budget for 2025. In particular, the biggest item there is the water carry forward of that $9 million. I think $7 million of that is under contract already. The tender process occurred in late June and early July. So there is already a significant level of commitment with that item. And then the other items are projects that were reviewed on numerous occasions as part of developing the enhanced annual plan. So just a bit different from prior years, really responding to questions that had occurred and providing a bit more background and context. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. We'll take some questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Paul, number one, on the first page of this report, page 176, the water request for carry forwards is shown as $9.2 million. But if you go to the page where all of those things are broken down, page 178, and you look at the things that are identified as carry forwards in the water area, specifically referred to in that bracket as carry forwards, they come to a total of $8,381,000. So it's basically about a $900,000 difference. Can somebody explain that to me, please? And the other, I would have thought concerning matter that we might get some opinions from on you guys. You're saying that if we do this, the borrowing will not affect compliance with debt covenants and so on, but it will reduce the time until council is forecast to become non-compliant. And that forecast is currently that we'll be non-compliant in 2028. Well, if not then when? How much closer to being non-compliant are we going to be if we approve this?
Yeah, that non-compliance issue was based on the sort of the first draft of the long-term plan that was considered some time ago. I mean, we've acknowledged, and I think, acknowledged in the enhanced annual plan that is going to be one of the major issues that we need to consider in the development of the 25-34 long-term plan. And really that's the place for that consideration and that discussion. So I can't say when, be more precise than that.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Sorry, and the variation in the budget and the.
Just trying to work that out.
So carry forward budgets to me, are actually not at all conducive to the profitability or the way this council works. 14 million on 70 is about another 15%, something like that, over and above what's already budgeted for, and all the money is borrowed. So we're actually living in a false economy in that scenario. So look, you can carry forward budgets forward, but by the same token, in my opinion, then you take that same amount out of this year's budget, so that you're sticking within the budgets that you have. Otherwise, we're blowing it out. Bearing in mind that it's all the two things, it's got to be achievable, and then to be carried forward. Obviously, it wasn't achievable in that year, so achieve it in this year under this year's budget, and once that's completed, we'll then reapply again, and hopefully further down the track. The way I said, perhaps I'm old-fashioned, but it means that it will lead to project prioritization and need to be supported with a robust business plan and achievable timelines. And until we get that, then we won't have a financial process that will actually deliver what we're actually asking to be delivered.
Thank you for that. Yes. Mr. Rinder.
Just in response to Councillor Hopkins's question, the green section on page 179, when you total up for water, it amounts to 9.151 million, which rounded up would be 9.2. So I'm just unsure where the.
Well, I agree with you, but what I did was I simply added the quantums identified with the words carry forward. And I did not include the budget recast or budget recast at the bottom and so on. So I just tallied up the things that have been identified specifically as carry forwards, and they come to 8381. So are the others also carry forwards, or are you actually including as carry forwards things that actually aren't?
Through the chair, anything that is in that green section where it says amount that needs to be carried forward into financial year 25 is to be considered a carry forward. There may be aspects of the particular project that we'll put forward and recast, but there may be aspects that are under contractual obligations where we do need to fulfil those.
Thank you. I'll take councillor Blackler and then councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thanks for this report. And also, I guess I'd just like to acknowledge the steps that we're taking to, you know, incrementally get better in this space. It's there has been a difference, you know, year on year about the focus we're putting on this and working through the issue. And obviously there's still a way to go, but I just want to acknowledge that as a first step. But regarding the summary of options considered, I just wondered if we were to say that none of those options were acceptable to us, and that, let's say hypothetically, the group wished to emphasise the importance of sticking to the budget that's been set, what options are available to us to provide some clear direction without adding too much complication at your end, because obviously we've already set the enhanced annual plan, but logically it would make sense to bring the carry forwards in and push some of the later scheduled works out, but that's probably not the order of events that is available to us. Am I right in saying that, or is there a way that we could circumvent that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And sorry, I'm just trying to work out, given that you did say you didn't want to make it an unnecessarily complicated process. I think the most practical option would be something like a 6-month review or a half-year review where we give a detailed update on the progress and delivery of all of the projects, because we almost going back to Councillor McCone's point, some of these projects have very long timeframes and take a long time from initiation to development to procurement to delivery. So we're never going to have a clean cut off at the end of the year where we say, oh, okay, that's it. It's, you know, we want a good flow of work both for the contractors and for the workflow of the teams. So I think an assessment at sort of a half-year mark of progress on the projects, and then the ability of the governance team to make some decisions about, well, that one's just not far enough advanced, or we know about this, therefore let's put it on hold and reconsider it as part of the long-term plan. So I suppose my suggestion of an additional resolution would be a very strong sort of half-year review. Be effective probably means pre-Christmas, so it might be like a 4 or 5 month review. That's I suppose my best thoughts on how to achieve what my understanding of what you're talking about.
Thank you for that. I will ask Mr. Palmley, but then also just want to acknowledge our chair, independent chair for PAR committee, who's here, if he wanted to add any comments as well.
So I was just going to add a couple of things really, and some of this is about, works into transformation and thinking about the changes we need to make there. I think the way we're set up at the moment, we're always going to have carry forwards, because the whole budget for projects shows within 1 year, when we know they're not going to be delivered over 1 year. Some of them take longer than that. And I think we need to look at, in our project planning and our budget planning, how we show that differently going forward, so that we can reflect the time that it's going to take for that to deliver. I think a couple of other things in there as well is to recognise that over the past couple of years, the whole capital budget has been distorted by what we need to do in the area. And so if you look at, the carry forwards for the past few years, they're dominated by water. And I think it's simply, the regulatory requirements have stepped up and, we've increased the team in that area to deliver, but it's a game of catch up within that area. But nevertheless, we have, I think you can say make progress. That doesn't mean we are where we want to be, but, the carry forward proposed this year is considerably less than last year. So if you look at the proposed carry forward, it's half the amount of just what Waters was, carrying forward alone the year before. And on top of that, we have now got a smaller capital programme within the enhanced annual plan than what has been in there for the past couple of years as well. So, it is more deliverable, but I think it's a message for all of us really on officer and elected member side that we do need to become more focused and prioritise better in what we do, but we also need to make changes in terms of the way we budget and plan for our projects and our capital expenditure as well, and we need to sort of have regard to that going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Neil, would you like to make any comments? And then also have Councillor Holding.
I guess just from me, I mean, you're being asked today to approve an additional budget spend of 20% above what you've already approved for the annual plan in the first month of the financial year, when we've got a history of not actually delivering all of the things that we budgeted on doing in the past as well, and independent advice that suggests that you're going to run out of the ability to borrow money in the next 2 years. It's not a bottomless pit and you can't keep doing it. And why would you commit to Councillor McCone's point? Why would you commit to increasing the budget for CapEx by 20% in the first month of the year when you could look 6 months into the year and see whether that was as high a risk or not? Why cast it now?
I think if you didn't agree any of this now, it causes some challenge in that some of these projects have started.
Sorry,
we need to be clear what we're saying there. If you didn't agree any of this, we'd have some contractual problems.
My apologies for the lack of clarification. I'm not suggesting that you don't proceed with the carry forward projects as they sit right now. I'm recommending that you don't increase the CapEx budget to reflect the $14.5 million at the same time, and that you review in 5 or 6 months' time whether surely there must be $15 million worth of CapEx budgets in the forecast for the next financial year that you could tag as being less likely to start than some of the others, and that you could review those at a point in time later in the year to see whether they were likely to go ahead, and if so, then you could look at whether you needed to increase the budget by $14 to $15 million. But I'm not suggesting you pause any of the immediate carry forwards.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Holding.
My question probably wasn't as important as the meeting's trajectory, but I guess if you want to answer this Simon's question, is there 14 million of savings with your final projects?
Well, that's why I was suggesting, no, we couldn't give you an answer now. We would need to get well into the year and understand if any of the projects are, whether there's substantial issues with the delivery inside a 12-month period, or there are options to defer and reconsider. And that essentially, that's why I was suggesting it's a not now, it's a 4-month question. So capturing that requirement in a resolution was my suggestion on how we address that issue.
Thank you for that. I've got a few more questions. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor McCone and Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's not a question, it's a position statement. I understand what Mr. Hope said about what's happened historically in the past, but I believe that we need to be having a mindset change. We need to be far more agile, and I would therefore support my learned colleague to my right's position that if it's being carried over, something else has to be cut, because we cannot keep going to the well when the well is going dry.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
Right, my learned colleague to the left has pretty much covered that off, so no, pretty good. I might be just colleague, but I'd just also say that I'm probably more hardline than that, and yeah, if the carry forward is allowed, it is not negotiable. There is something got to be chopped off. There's no cost plus anymore, and as Jim has just reiterated, we have a budget, we're in debt, and let's just sort out what we've got to get done and prioritise it and come back with business studies to see which way is the next step.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins. And then
Yeah,
Councillor.
I have a question. Noting Mr. Neal's point about there being a 20% increase in CapEx, I'm not sure that that's, maybe Paul or Amanda can, Mr. Nicol or Mr. Hope can clarify this. There are things in here that are going to be almost exclusively funded from external sources, like the Forest Gallery extension. We've got 6 million, I think, for that. I thought the Geopark Hub, that was, we absolutely said that's coming from somewhere else. It's not, the million's not coming from us. And there are a variety of other things in here that I would have thought were funded out of the RMA fund, out of other sources like that won't involve necessarily loan funding all. And we've got 15 million for the sake of argument for the event centre, and we've said, well, 5 mil of that is not going to come from rates. It's going to come from sale of things and other. So what I'm saying is, am I right in assuming that Mr. Neal is correct that there's a 20% increase, but that doesn't equate to a 20% increase in rate or loan funded costs, because there is a not inconsiderable percentage of that that's coming from external sources.
Welcome, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm late. Yep, in answer to your question, both financially, there's a lot of externally funded projects. So the Sports and Event Centre, obviously the full cost of the project is not going to be funded by us, and it's not going to be debt funded. Same with the Forester example that you gave. Also, in terms of capacity to complete the projects, I've tried to emphasise in my report, a lot of the projects are completed by external contractors like the Sports and Event Centre. So while it looks like a massive $70 million CapEx project, bigger than we've ever done before, a lot of them are already contracted out, so it doesn't add too much to our workload. Also, I've spoken specifically to Waters. So about 7 million of the carry forwards that we're looking to today are to do, well, there's 9 million and about 7 mil of Waters ones, about 7 mil are committed with contractors already in terms of building reservoir and renewing rural mains. So in terms of the carry forward budget, they're committed to, and we have capacity to do them. In terms of the existing Waters budget, we've also tried to look at that. It was about 17.5 million. And I've specifically asked if there's projects that they feel will not be completed in the 25 financial year. And they feel that they will be, while not necessarily fully complete, they will be committed and at varying stages of completion at 30 June 25. They would like to remind that the program for 25 has been quite seriously scaled back. Recall when we went through the annual plan and looked at these projects, the Waters program was significantly scaled back for 25 and deferred into 26 already. They'd also like to point out that 4.4 million of the drinking water upgrades are entirely completed by Corridale Water Management Limited. So that's, while it's on our books as a CapEx project that comes under us, it's completed by someone else and funded by them. So yeah, there's lots of different reasons. Also, a lot of the Waters projects, as we talked about in the annual plan deliberations, they're legislatively required and they have timeframes. So that's why they're in the program for 2025 in the first place. So yeah, I have tried to go back and say, is there some that can be deferred until later years? The answer was no. I have asked also if there's some that we could look at that we could come back at the start of next year, postpone until then. They're still very keen to see these projects happen in 2025 for these legislative requirements and everything. But yeah, that is something that we could look into. But yeah, the situation is this is the same conversation we had as we went into the annual plan. This is what is required for the 25 financial year. It's what was approved in 2025 in the 2025 annual plan budget. And at that time, we did mention the carry forwards would be coming. So yes.
Thank you for that. We have Councillor Blackler and then Councillor Percival.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'd be happy to move the recommendation with an additional set of wording, which would be the council approves the capital expenditure carry forward budgets totaling 14.5 million for the 24-25 financial year, and requests officers bring a decision report that will set out potential necessary reprioritisation or revised delivery timeframes during Q2 of the financial year to ensure adherence to approved budgeted external borrowing in the enhanced annual plan.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's been seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
Well, this captures what Mr. Neil said, and it captures what Councillor McCone said, and Councillor Thompson for that matter as well. What Tim has done is put together a set of words that effectively say sometime between now and Christmas, and Paul suggested that it should be before Christmas, that officers come back and say, well, look, we've had another look and we don't think we're going to get to this one, or we don't think we're going to get to that one. And if you take into account that Amanda's information about the number of things that are going to be externally funded, ergo won't need loan funding or rate funding, Tim has basically said that before Christmas, we'll get another report that says that whatever we're going to do, we'll stick within our agreed borrowing. And I think that sums up what you guys wanted and what Simon had actually suggested we should be doing, and what Paul agreed would be useful.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, we have this discussion every year, and it's always been my regard that in preparation for the annual plan, we should have some notification of an indication of what carry forwards will be, which can't be hard to do because every department has its own programs. This is cart before the horse material as far as I'm concerned, and I agree with the sentiments around the table.
Yes, Councillor McCone.
So just for a point of clarification, does that mean we are acknowledging the carry forwards, which can be actually action on as CapEx projects for this year, or do they have to come back and be ticked off before they actually get that approval?
Certainly the intent of my wording is that I'm not trying to stymie the carry forwards that are in a couple of instances probably currently in play. What I'm trying to say is let's stick to the budget and focus on things that are further down the line that we have some time to either reprioritize or alter delivery timeframes. But in the meantime, we approve the carry forwards as listed and as indicated are necessary.
Yes.
Again, what we're saying is we stick this inside the current budget and reassess things further down the track. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah, sorry, my interpretation, it's basically sit inside the debt budget. And we fit inside of that and come back and report basically status against that and options as to whether, how we could stay under that debt cap set out in the enhanced annual plan, rather than that individual project level. It's, here's the cap, stick to it.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Is that okay with everybody? All right, so you've got a mover and a second. Can we just read what the actual recommendation will say?
Through you, Madam Chair. That council, 1, approves the capital expenditure carry forward budgets totaling 14.5 million for the 2024-25 financial year, and 2, requests officers bring a decision report that will set out potential necessary reprioritisation of revised delivery timeframes or revised, so I do actually have that, or revised delivery timeframes during Q2 of the financial year to ensure adherence to approved external borrowing in the enhanced annual plan.
Is everyone happy with that? All right, is everyone clear on that? Okay, shall we put that to a vote? Okay, those in favour of recommendation 1 and 2? Okay, those against? All right, that is carried. Thank you very much. I think that brings our public items to a close. I'd just like to thank the public that have joined us on the live stream. We will be closing this part and we will go back into Public Excluded for some matters to discuss, but I think we will be having a 20-25 minute break for lunch, and then we'll come back and finish the remaining Public Excluded items on our agenda. So thank you for those that have joined. We'll close this part off. And then we'll adjourn the meeting.